You may write me out of your life, but you will never erase the wisdom I walked away with. And that is my freedom. There is a difference between holding someone close and holding on because you are afraid to be without them. There is a difference between love and longing, and far too many of us have not been taught how to tell them apart. We grow up with stories that tell us love should consume us, that love should hurt, that love should come with sacrifice, and that the deeper the pain, the deeper the passion. But that is not love. That is attachment masquerading in a beautiful disguise. You see, attachment feeds off the absence of wholeness. It clings to what it fears losing. It survives on anxiety, on anticipation, on fantasy. But connection, true soul deep connection, is not needy. It does not ask you to shrink or beg. It doesn't threaten to leave if you speak your truth. It welcomes your fullness. It sees you clearly. It loves you sober. Attachment often begins quietly. At first, you're just excited. There's a spark, a rhythm. They say the right things. You laugh at the same jokes. And slowly, without realizing, you begin to lean a little more than you stand. You begin to rely on their mood to determine your own. Their presence becomes your oxygen, their absence, a void you don't know how to fill. But what you call love might just be a lack of boundaries dressed in romantic language. What you call destiny might just be trauma bonding itself to your loneliness. Attachment is not rooted in respect, it is rooted in need. It whispers to you that if they leave, you will fall apart, that you need them to be okay, that without their affection, you're not enough. And when that happens, when your identity begins to wrap itself around someone else's opinion of you, that's when you've stepped out of connection and into captivity. There's a quiet grief that comes with realizing that what you thought was love was simply survival. That you stayed not because they made you better, but because they made you afraid to be alone. That you mistook their inconsistency for passion. And that you confuse chaos for chemistry. And oh, how easy it is to do that when your soul is tired of waiting for someone to see you. But love, real love, is not confused. It doesn't leave you guessing. It doesn't make you question your worth. Love says you are enough even when you are not performing. Love says, I see you even in silence. Love says, I will not make you earn what should be given freely. You deserve that kind of love. But first, you must learn how to give it to yourself. You must learn to sit with the ache of being without them and not run back to what hurt you just because it's familiar. You must learn to look at the mirror and not see what they didn't love, but what you forgot to cherish. Attachment will keep you rehearsing the same pain over and over again, trying to earn a different ending from someone who has already shown you who they are. It will keep you addicted to potential, chasing after a version of them that only existed in the beginning, or only ever existed in your hope. But connection does not live in potential. Connection lives in reality. It says, here I am, take me as I am, and I will do the same for you. It does not hide. It does not manipulate. It does not demand that you lose yourself just to keep it alive. And maybe the hardest thing you'll ever have to do is admit that you weren't really connected. You were just attached to the idea of them, to the possibility, to the memory of that one time they got it right. Maybe the truth is that you were never truly held, just temporarily gripped by someone who needed your light more than they respected your boundaries. It hurts, doesn't it? To look back and realize you gave so much to someone who didn't know what to do with it, that you emptied yourself trying to fill the space where their consistency should have been, that you waited, heart in hand, for the bare minimum and called it love. But there is no shame in that, because to feel deeply is not a weakness, to hope is not a flaw. To believe in love, even when it has betrayed you, is a testament to your courage, not your foolishness. What matters now is not that you got lost in them. What matters is that you are willing to come back to yourself, to come home, to stand firm in the knowledge that you were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person, that your softness was not the problem. Their inability to receive it was, that you are not unlovable just because they could not love you the way you needed. The next time your heart feels drawn to someone, ask yourself, is this connection or attachment? Does this person expand me, or do I feel like I must edit myself to stay close to them? Do I feel safe, or am I constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop? Do I feel chosen, or do I feel like I'm chasing? Because connection does not require you to abandon your intuition. It deepens it. Connection does not ask for performance, it celebrates presence. And connection, real, sacred, mutual connection, is not afraid of your fullness. You are not too much. You are not too sensitive. You are not too emotional. You are just not meant to be entangled with those who cannot hold what you carry. Learn the difference. Honor the lesson. And above all, return to yourself. Because your peace is the proof that you've healed past the need to be held by someone who only loved the version of you that needed saving. And you, my dear, were born to be whole, not half-loved. There is no healing without first honoring the wound. You cannot skip the ache and expect to arrive at peace. You must walk through the fire. You must sit with the sorrow. You must learn to speak the language of your own pain, and not in whispers, but in full voice. You see, healing is not about pretending you're fine. It's not about wearing a brave face while your heart trembles in silence. It's not about numbing the ache with distractions or pretending that what happened didn't hurt you. Healing is about facing it, raw, unfiltered, and brave, letting your grief stretch out in front of you without shame, letting your anger rise without guilt, letting your tears fall without apology. Feel it fully. That is where the truth lives. That is where your strength is born. Because if you do not feel it now, it will come back later. And it will not knock gently. It will show up in the way you push people away who try to love you right. It will show up in the way your chest tightens every time your phone doesn't ring. It will show up in your silence, in your stillness, in your inability to trust joy. So let it hurt. Let it knock you down if it must. Let it crack you open. Let it strip away the illusions, the expectations, the lies you told yourself to stay comfortable in someone else's chaos. Because pain, when you allow it to teach you, becomes your prophet. It becomes your compass. It shows you where your boundaries were broken, where your worth was compromised, where your voice was silenced. But here's the part many forget. Pain is a visitor, not a tenant. You are meant to feel it and not live in it. You are meant to welcome the lesson and not build a life around the loss. So many people build homes in their hurt. They decorate their sadness with stories. They memorize their betrayals until they can recite them like scripture. They rehearse the pain so much that they forget what peace sounds like. They forget what joy feels like. It becomes safer to hold on to the sadness than to reach for healing, because healing means change. Healing means risk. Healing means no longer being the victim. And that kind of power scares people who've only ever known survival. But your soul was not made to live in the ashes. Your spirit was not born to camp in the ruins. Yes, feel the hurt, cry if you must, scream if you need to, write letters you'll never send, revisit the moments that broke you, not to stay there, but to see them clearly, because clarity is what frees you, not closure. Closure is not something someone gives you. It is something you decide, and you decide it when you stop giving pain permission to be your home address. You decide it when you say, I will not let what they did define how I love myself now. I will not let that moment determine the melody of the rest of my life. You are allowed to grieve, but you are not obligated to carry that grief like identity. You are allowed to be angry, but you are not required to stay bitter. You are allowed to remember, but you are not bound to relive. You see, pain is sacred, but so is peace. And there comes a point where you must stop picking at the wound just to remember how it bled. There comes a point where you must choose to lay the weight down, even if you don't yet know how to live without it. That choice, that sacred choice, is how you begin again. It is how you reclaim your breath, your light, your softness. The softness that didn't die in the storm, just hid beneath the debris. The softness that says, I am still here. Bruised but not broken, wounded but not worthless. To feel it fully means to give yourself the dignity of healing with honesty. It means to sit down with your sorrow like an old friend, but not let it unpack and stay. It means you stop apologizing for how deeply you were hurt, and you start honoring how deeply you deserve to be whole. Some days, healing will feel like work. Other days, it will feel like war. And on many days, it will feel like both. But it will be worth it, because you are worth it. You are worth the tenderness of your own care. You are worth the peace that comes after the storm. You are worth loving in a way that doesn't ask you to bleed just to be seen. And no matter what broke your heart, you are not broken beyond repair. Yes, feel it, but remember who you are in the midst of it. Remember that the fact that you can feel is a sign that you have not turned to stone, that you are still human, still open, still willing to love again, wisely, slowly, intentionally. And that is the kind of strength the world rarely sees. So let the grief pass through. Let it wash over you like rain, but don't let it become your identity. Don't let it define your days. Don't let it convince you that life will always feel like this, because the heart is resilient, the soul is forgiving, and you are becoming. Let the pain come. Welcome it with honesty. Sit with it. Speak to it. And when it has said all it needed to say, rise. Not in spite of the pain, but because of it. Memory can be a gentle liar. It softens the edges of the hurt. It edits the scene, rewrites the script, and adds light where there was once only shadow. Time has a way of turning even pain into poetry if we let it. And that is where the danger lies, because when you start to miss what you had, you forget who you had to become just to survive it. It's easy to remember the laughter and forget the loneliness, to recall the good days and overlook how rare they truly were. It's easy to replay the warmth and mute the moments when you were left out in the emotional cold. But nostalgia will never tell the whole story, only the parts that keep you from moving forward. And if you're not careful, you'll find yourself longing for the very thing that once made you feel invisible. You'll crave the comfort of what was familiar, even if it cost you your voice. You'll sit and miss someone who didn't even notice when your spirit began to shrink in their presence. That is the danger of romanticizing what kept you small. You see, when you're healing, there's a temptation to cling to the illusion of what could have been rather than face what truly was. You look back and think, maybe it wasn't so bad. Maybe if I had done something differently, it could have worked. And in that moment, you begin to betray yourself all over again. You forget how many times you swallowed your truth to keep the peace. How many moments you felt the sting of silence louder than any argument. You forget how you walked on eggshells, editing your tone, shrinking your joy, tiptoeing around their moods like it was your full-time job. And even when you wanted to leave, something kept pulling you back. Not because it was love, but because it was familiar, because the wound felt like home, because chaos was dressed in charm, because you had convinced yourself that the little they gave you was the best you could get. But let's tell the truth. It wasn't love that kept you there. It was your fear of letting go, your fear of starting over, your fear that maybe you weren't enough without them. And that fear will lie to you. It will dress up dysfunction in soft music and candlelight. It will wrap your wounds in sweet memories. It will convince you to stay loyal to a version of the past that never really loved you back. But the truth, the quiet, powerful, unwavering truth, is that you were not your full self in their presence. You shrank, you settled, you silenced your spirit so they wouldn't feel small next to your light. And that is not love. That is not connection. That is a contract signed in silence. A silent agreement that your worth would always come second to their comfort. So you must stop calling it beautiful just because it was familiar. You must stop labeling it almost love just because it looked like affection on the surface. You must stop making a masterpiece out of what was really just a moment. You cannot build a future on the foundation of something that once demanded your dimming. And I know how hard it is to release something you once held with both hands. I know how the heart holds on even when the mind knows better. I know how lonely it gets when you finally walk away from the place you once called home, even if that place never truly felt like one. But you cannot heal while holding hands with the thing that broke you. You cannot move forward while still romanticizing the road that led to your ruin. There is a freedom in seeing the past for what it really was, not what you hoped it could be. There is power in saying, yes, there were good times, but the cost of staying was my peace, and that is too high a price, because your peace is sacred. Your voice is sacred. Your light, the one you tried so hard to protect, is not meant to be dimmed just to make someone else comfortable. You were never meant to stay small just to be loved. You were meant to rise, to expand, to be fully seen, not tolerated, to be celebrated, not just kept around out of convenience. You were meant to be with people who see your growth not as a threat, but as a gift. So stop dressing up your pain in pretty language. Stop writing poetry for someone who made you feel like a burden. Stop waiting for closure from the same hands that let you go without care. Instead, honor the truth. Honor the parts of you that had to break so you could wake up. Honor the strength it took to leave, even if it still aches. Honor the courage it takes to admit, that chapter looked lovely from the outside, but I was wilting inside. Because that's what happens when you romanticize what kept you small. You forget that your soul was starving. You forget that your smile was surviving. You forget that your dreams had to be quiet just to make the relationship work. But you don't have to forget anymore. You just have to forgive yourself for ever believing that love was supposed to feel like sacrifice. You have to forgive yourself for staying too long, for hoping too hard, for loving someone who didn't have the capacity to hold your heart gently. Now is your time to release it, not with bitterness, but with clarity, not with regret, but with reverence for the version of you who kept going, even with a heavy heart. That version of you didn't know what they know now, but you know it today. And now that you know, it is your sacred duty not to go back to what asked you to be less than you are. Some distances are not about space. They are about survival. They are about choosing your sanity over your suffering. They are about stepping back, not to punish, but to protect. Because when the noise of someone else's presence drowns out the voice of your own soul, you must listen to that silence calling you home. Creating sacred distance is not the same as walking away in anger. It is not fueled by bitterness. It is not about slamming doors or throwing final words like knives across the room. Sacred distance is soft, but it is firm. It is holy, even when it's heavy. It is the quiet decision to say, I cannot keep dancing with what dismantles me. There are people who will never know how much you had to unfeel just to function. People who will never realize the cost of their closeness, because for them it was comfort. For them it was companionship. But for you, it was a slow fading, a quiet erasure, a beautiful but painful blur between love and loss of self. You stayed in the name of love, but the longer you stayed, the further you drifted from your own truth. You laughed, but not from your gut. You smiled, but it didn't reach your soul. You showed up, but you disappeared inside. And when you finally left, even if just emotionally, even if just spiritually, it wasn't to cause harm. It was to remember how to breathe. Because healing doesn't always start with answers. Sometimes it starts with distance. Sometimes it begins with removing yourself from the field where the battle keeps repeating, from the cycle that convinces you to keep sacrificing your peace just to avoid being alone. But being alone is not the same as being lonely. In fact, some of the loneliest moments are spent in rooms where you feel unseen. Some of the most painful silences are not between strangers, but between hearts that once promised to stay connected. Sacred distance says, I still love you, but I must love me too. It says, I cannot keep burning just to keep the light on in a place where I am not even welcome anymore. It says, my peace matters more than being understood by someone who has no intention of truly seeing me. That kind of distance is not cold. It's courageous. It's not cruel. It's clarity. You cannot keep touching what cuts you and expecting not to bleed. You cannot keep opening yourself to energy that only takes, only drains, only demands. Eventually, you must realize that access to you is a privilege, not a right. And here is what they won't tell you. Healing is often lonely at first. Because the moment you choose to step away from the chaos, you step into a silence that echoes. It's in that silence that all the memories come back, the laughter, the beginnings, the dreams, and for a while you'll question your decision. You'll wonder if maybe you were too sensitive, if maybe you could have tried harder, if maybe the good times meant more than the pain. But listen closely. That is not your intuition. That is your wound speaking. That is your old wiring trying to make sense of new strength. Because sacred distance is not always welcomed by the part of you still seeking validation. It is not always understood by the child inside you who just wanted to be chosen, but it is needed, and in time, it will set you free. There is holiness in the space you create for your own healing. There is divinity in the boundaries you enforce, even if your voice shakes as you speak them. There is power in saying, I will not keep reliving the same heartbreak just because I'm too afraid to start over. You are not abandoning them. You are returning to yourself. You are not giving up. You are honoring the parts of you that fought for so long in silence, the parts that stayed too long, the parts that were tired of pretending. It is not your job to carry the weight of relationships that are one-sided. It is not your purpose to be the emotional landfill for those who refuse to take accountability. It is not your duty to stay where your soul cannot stretch. You are allowed to be unavailable to those who consistently misunderstand you. You are allowed to say no, even when you once said yes. You are allowed to evolve out of old versions of love that taught you to disappear in exchange for acceptance. Sacred distance is the bridge between who you were and who you are becoming. It is the quiet clearing of space so your spirit can breathe again. It is the intentional retreat from what once felt like home but began to feel like a prison. It is the removal of noise so that you can finally hear your own wisdom rising. And when you take that space, when you create that divine separation, you begin to see clearly. You begin to notice how much you were tolerating, how many times you said, "It's okay," when it wasn't. How many times you stayed quiet to avoid another fight. How many times you rationalized behavior that chipped away at your dignity. But sacred distance doesn't leave room for illusions. It wipes the mirror clean. It lets you see not the dream you held, but the reality you lived. And in that seeing, something shifts. You stop begging to be chosen. You stop over-explaining your worth. You stop needing the apology that may never come. You begin to anchor into a deeper truth. that your value is not contingent on who stays close, but on how fiercely you remain loyal to your own becoming. That is sacred, that is holy, and that is where peace begins. Because peace is not just the absence of conflict, it is the presence of boundaries. It is the space between you and what once kept you small. It is the air that fills your lungs after years of holding your breath. It is the sound of your own soul whispering, "Thank you for coming back to me." So take the distance if you need it. Take it not in bitterness, but in reverence. Take it with tenderness and truth. Take it with the knowing that you are not walking away from love. You are walking toward the kind of love that will not ask you to abandon yourself to receive it. The kind of love that lives in peace. The kind that honors your light. The kind that starts within. And in that sacred space, may you finally meet yourself again. There comes a time when you look around at your life and realize it's not your life at all. It's a collection of pieces, pieces of time, attention, care, and energy that you handed out like breath. Pieces of yourself you gave to people who didn't always understand the weight of your offering. And when you finally pause, when the noise settles and your spirit gets quiet enough to listen, you feel the hollowness. You feel the lack. Not because you never had enough, but because you gave too much to what never gave back. Energy is your most sacred currency. It is what fuels your purpose. It is what ignites your creativity, your presence, your clarity. It's what wraps your words in power and lifts your thoughts into motion. And if you're not careful, you will spend it on people and places that do not pour anything back into you. You will spend it defending yourself, fixing things you didn't break, over-explaining your worth to people committed to misunderstanding it, waiting on apologies that will never be shaped by their lips. This is not about blame. This is about awareness, because when you love deeply, when your heart is wired for empathy, you often give without pause. You give even when it costs you. You give even when you're tired. You pour until you're empty and then apologize for having nothing left. And over time, depletion becomes your normal. You don't even realize how heavy you've become until you try to rise and your soul says, "No more." There is no glory in exhaustion. There is no virtue in being everyone's savior while you bleed in silence. You are allowed to reclaim what you gave away, not with bitterness, but with clarity, not with revenge, but with reverence. You are allowed to pull back the power you offered too freely. You are allowed to choose you. This is not selfishness. This is sacred self-respect. There are people who will take as long as you continue to give. They will lean as long as you allow yourself to be leaned on. They will drain you, not out of malice, but out of habit. Because somewhere along the way, you taught them that your needs came second to their comfort. But you don't have to keep proving your love by making yourself small. You don't have to keep earning your place in rooms that leave you feeling empty. You don't have to keep dancing for approval when your presence alone is a masterpiece. Reclaiming your energy begins with remembering that you were never meant to be everything to everyone. You were meant to be whole to yourself. It starts with forgiveness, not for them, but for you, for the version of you who didn't know any better, for the one who gave so much away hoping it would finally be enough, for the one who overextended, overfunctioned, overexplained, and overweighted. You did the best you could with the love you had at the time, and now you know better. So call your energy back. Call it back from the text threads you still scroll through, searching for closure. Call it back from the arguments where you sacrificed your peace just to be heard. Call it back from the nights you waited, the days you doubted, the moments you molded yourself into someone smaller just to make someone stay. Call it back from the rooms where your voice was ignored, from the friendships that felt one-sided, from the love that asked you to give and give and give, but forgot to fill you back up. You do not need to hate them to heal. You do not need to burn the memories to rise. You just need to stop watering what does not grow you, because every time you say yes out of guilt, every time you say no to yourself just to be accepted, you are teaching your spirit that everyone else's needs matter more than your own. And your spirit, your deep, wise, knowing spirit, will begin to dim in that denial. But when you reclaim your energy, the light returns. Slowly at first, quietly, like the morning sun inching over a mountaintop. It doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to be dramatic. It just needs to be consistent. A boundary here, a pause there, a full breath taken before answering a call, a quiet refusal to beg for what should have been freely given. You begin to remember your worth, not as an idea, but as a knowing. You begin to walk differently, speak differently, show up with less need to prove and more permission to simply be. Because you are not here to live a life of emotional bankruptcy. You are not here to constantly serve and soothe and sacrifice while calling that love. You are here to create, to rest, to rise, to love and to receive. You are here to feel joy that isn't followed by guilt. You are here to be cared for without having to earn it with your exhaustion. You are here to be seen as you are, not just as the role you play in someone else's story. But in order to live like that, you must reclaim what you gave away too easily. Your energy, your attention, your time, your softness, your patience, your gifts, not because they were wasted, but because they were sacred, because you are sacred. And sacred things must be handled with care. This doesn't mean you stop loving people. This doesn't mean you never give again. It just means you give from a full cup, not from your reserves. You love with boundaries, not abandonment. You help with wisdom, not depletion. You give with balance, not desperation. And maybe some people will not like the new you. Maybe they liked you better when you gave everything away and asked for nothing, but that's okay. You're not living for their comfort. You're living for your wholeness. You're no longer interested in performing for approval. You're more interested in peace. So stand in your truth. Let your no be complete. Let your silence be holy. Let your absence from the places that drained you be the loudest declaration of your healing. You are allowed to stop showing up for people who don't show up for you. You are allowed to keep your energy sacred. You are allowed to pour into yourself without apology. And you are allowed to begin again, filled, grounded, and whole. Call it all back. Call back the light that flickered when you doubted yourself. Call back the laughter that faded in rooms where you were unseen. Call back the parts of you that dimmed just to survive. Call back your joy, your creativity, your clarity, your trust in your own intuition. You didn't lose it. It was waiting, and now you are ready to receive it. There's no easy way to let go of someone your heart still whispers about at night. But here's the truth. Your spirit knows what your emotions have not yet accepted. You are not meant to stay in places that don't nourish your soul. Detachment is not the absence of love. It is the presence of self-respect. So go ahead, gather yourself, fold the memories, close the chapter with grace, not bitterness, and walk away, not because they were never worth loving, but because you are finally ready to love yourself more. Because when peace costs you your sanity, it is far too expensive, and your soul was never meant to live in debt.